and that kind of thing, and then we'll do a proper introduction.
Very good. So we are recording this session on our Zoom video conferencing, which will get us the PowerPoint and everybody's remarks. As all of you know, you guys are chiming in through the Polycom, which gives us really good fidelity on the sound. There's a handful of us who are following this on the Zoom system, and you'll see for the most part the PowerPoint slides that Melissa's working off of, but every now and then I will cut the PowerPoint and turn the video on Melissa just so that you can see who the star of the day is. We have an important request for all of you who are on the Polycom, and that is please hold any questions until Melissa is done with her presentation. Otherwise, it might be kind of chaotic with various folks chiming in. You might also want to mute your telephone so we don't pick up any of your background noise, meowing cats or typing keyboards or anything like that. So that would be a big help. For Lydia, Dick, and Georgia, who are signed on to the Zoom, if you have a question, hit that little chat button on your Zoom page and say, Dick Sayre here, I have a question or a comment. Janice is monitoring all that from her chair and computer, and we'll know that we need to splice you in for a question or a comment. So we hope everything works right, and we will post on our archive website, which Jocelyn is going to walk us through again, the recordings. So you can watch this 5 or 6 times if you want. It'll be a big hit. So let me turn this back to Deborah.
Thanks, Pete. First of all, for those of you on Zoom, I did the dry run this week. It's very easy to connect to, so if any of you are on the telephone that want to connect to Zoom, it just takes a minute. Those of you who are on Zoom, that chat button is an orange button down at the bottom of the Zoom screen. So feel free to do that. Your messages will float in, and we'll be able to direct the attention when we go to questions and answers. First of all, I wanted to thank all of you for joining today. It is a crazy time in the world. None of us have lived through a pandemic, so we have been trying to be responsive to the issues and needs, and I understand that today many people had other priorities, and we certainly understand that. All of this information will, as Pete said, be put up on our website for future digestion whenever people are ready to tune into that. And we will re-review the highlights of this at some point when things are better and we can all safely gather as a group and really dig into this kind of work. In the meantime, I don't know about you, but I was hungry for something I could focus on that was a little bit in my control. So those of you that are that are along with me, then I hope that this is a nice distraction that you can really dig into. I wanted to thank Melissa for her great work today. One of the things that we had laid out as we set out our agenda as a group was to inform ourselves about what else is happening in Rhode Island concerning sea level rise and climate change responses, resiliency building programs. And so we all agreed that we didn't need to reinvent the wheel here. We could look to others for what was successful, what was moving forward, who had good ideas that might relate to the kinds of circumstances and situations we have in our community. And so Melissa has dug in deep, rolled up her sleeves, and educated herself on some really interesting programs that are happening in our sister Rhode Island cities. So I look forward to hearing about that today, and then very much look forward to having a robust discussion amongst ourselves in the future or later today so that we can decide what of that might be something we want to pick up and continue to explore for our community. So with that said, are we ready for Jocelyn's got some announcements?
I just wanted to take a minute to go through our archives site that we have up for all of the participants. You'll see that on the March 14th meeting date, that's today, we have the Zoom instructions, which will be there in the future. We can change for different meetings if we need to. Today's agenda, Melissa's presentation outline will be there, and that can be a resource for you in the future. And a couple other things from this meeting, we've got some student overviews and the Eastern Connecticut State briefing on the Watch Hill flooding. As you scroll down this page a bit, I did update also the one of the events, the managed retreat workshop that was at UConn has been rescheduled in November. So just if anyone was considering attending that, I think it was this coming week, just know that it's been rescheduled. I think that's,
Introduce Janice.
oh, sorry. And next I have Janice, who will be giving us a brief.
Good morning. About a week and a half ago, the students from the University of Rhode Island did a presentation at the university, attended by Pete August, and the rest of us tuned in via Zoom. The students presented their projects and their thoughts up to now. So there were presentations by the socioeconomic students, landscape architects, and ocean engineering. So they brought us up to speed as to where they thought they were going. They will be forwarding us questions. So we'll be, as soon as we get those, we will get them out to those of you that indicated wanted to be student liaisons for us. The session was recorded, and that will be made available to you on our archive site. The students, of course, are now out of session. Right now, their final presentation is scheduled for April 29th for them to report out, and we are really encouraged to attend. Of course, we'll keep you posted as to how that progresses. Eastern Connecticut State University is also out of session. We really look forward to their good work. Their field trip to Watch Hill has, of course, been rescheduled. So we will keep you posted.
Very good. Janice, Jocelyn, thank you for those newsy updates. I'm going to introduce our very distinguished speaker, but before I do, for those of you on the Zoom meeting and on Polycom, is everything coming through loud and clear for you? I want to do a little sound check before we get into the meat of today's presentation. Is everything coming through okay?
Yeah. Yes.
Super, very good. Thank you for that. So we have today Melissa Cote. Melissa is a marine scientist. She has her master's degree from UConn Avery Point. She has been a Napa tree naturalist, and besides assisting Janice with all things beach patrol and that sort of thing, Melissa was really a key participant in a lot of our stewardship activities. She's a very accomplished diver and was a key resource when we were doing our eelgrass mapping. Unfortunately, we lost Melissa a short time ago to the state of Maine, where she's now with the Department of Marine Sciences. Marine Resources. And she will be starting a very active field season of coastal monitoring with the state of Maine, and they hired the perfect person for that job. For the last couple of months, Melissa has been reviewing what other Rhode Island communities have been doing to deal with sea level rise and storm surge issues. This is in response to the call by everybody in our meeting group here It's the answer to the question, what are other people doing? We don't want to reinvent the wheel. Let's learn from the other communities. And so Melissa has pulled all that together for us. And with that, I'm going to bring up our PowerPoint and let Melissa take over.
Thanks, Pete. Thank you all for being with me here today. I know it's uncertain times, so I appreciate Pete and Janice and Jocelyn for setting up this Zoom account so we can all you can all chime in and from the comfort of your homes. So yeah, like Pete said, I was tasked with looking at what else is going on in other municipalities in Rhode Island, looking at how they're combating sea level rise and what storm surge adaptation projects that they've been working on, so that we can see what's been done and if we can learn from that. So if you would like to.
You can adjust.
All right, so I just wanted to go over the process for what a lot of these municipalities are going through, and I'm sure you're familiar with this process as well. Step one, just identify the problem or problems. Where's the water coming from? Is it storm water? Is it nuisance high tides? What's the root of the issue there? The second part is planning, engineering, design, coming up with an engineering company and trying to figure out what the best plan of action is for the issue. Third, funding and permitting. So where is the money going to come from? Permitting, you have to go through CRMC to put pretty much anything in. And then fourth, implementation, construction, and then monitoring, which is a question mark because a lot of people I talk to were like, well, we think it's working, but we haven't been out there in a while. So there's no real structure for monitoring these processes. So is the...
Yep, we're going to bring that up. And let me get this out of the way.
All right, here we go. Alrighty. So just a brief outline. I'm going to talk about 4 different towns: Barrington, Newport, South Kingstown, and Wickford. Each of them have a bunch of different projects going on, especially Barrington and Newport. And I just wanted to go over some quick terminology. I'm sure you've heard Grant talk about these coconut core burritos. So with that, I've going through all these different articles and talking to people. A lot of people actually use the term envelope, so that's what I'm going to be calling them, but just so you know, they're the same thing. I would like to keep the sand out of my burrito, so I'll go with envelope. All right, so just diving right in with Barrington. So in 2017, 2019, the Coastal Institute outlined or came up with 3 different types of areas: a natural area, a port, and a mixed use area. So Barrington and Warren, the towns, were selected as the mixed use areas. And what they did was they explored best practices and provided adaptation strategies so that municipalities, the state, policymakers, and planners could see what these could find the best practices and going forward to adapt to sea level rise and storm surge. And then right after that, Barrington decided to apply for municipal resilience, the municipal resilience program certification, which basically means that they will be allowed to apply for grants through the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank for sea level rise adaptation projects. So so the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank and the Nature Conservancy kind of facilitated this process for them, and they had a bunch of workshops where they outlined projects that need to be addressed going forward, and they kind of came up with like a schedule for each fiscal year of what needs to happen. So, and I know Westerly has also done this, is going through the certification project. I believe Pete and Deborah were at the meeting for Westerly. And also, I just wanted to point out, I don't think I said this, but Napatree was selected as the natural area for the Coastal Institute Climate Response demonstration site. All right, so moving on. So this first project, Barrington Beach. So this is an aerial photo before 2011. They had a lot of erosion coming from wave action. You can see the pavement is being eroded down the lower left corner. And they also had a lot of issue with stormwater flowing down the streets and creating these trenches in the sand and really eroding the sand away. And so you could see in the picture on the right, all the cars are parked right up against the sand. People are having a good time, but there's nothing really there to protect the parking lot from that wave action. So as a part of a larger stormwater or water quality project, they decided to take out the western side of the parking lot, remove 10 feet of the pavement and push it back and plant a natural area there. So you can see in these photos, this is 2013 during construction, the asphalt was being removed. You can see the part of the parking lot being taken out. And they also, I'll just go back for a second. If you can see the area just above the second picture on the bottom, there's a big parking lot area, pavement area there. They took that out. They put in a bunch of grass and a new bathroom and some green gardens there as well. So this picture on the right is the dune grass planting, and that prior there was 10 feet of pavement there. So they took that out, created a little dune with dune grass. Save the Bay came in with a bunch of volunteers and did that planting. So this is what it looks like after. So you can see that there's a nice area filled in with dune grass. And it came in really nicely. They took out that western part of the parking lot, put grass in there. And you can see where that pavement was before. There's a bunch of grass there and a little building with a bathroom. So lessons learned for this project. Talking with Phil Hervey from the town municipality. He's a planning and resilience director, I believe was his title. So overall, he said that the project was fairly successful. However, they are still having issues with stormwater running down the streets and creating these trenches in the sand where there aren't dune grass. You can see in the picture on the left, there's erosion at those spots. And I asked him, well, are there any plans moving forward to kind of mitigate that or help that or a problem? And they're looking at, Wendy Ferguson from Save the Bay said they're looking at putting in some sort of infiltration areas on the roads where you can see in the right photo, there's some arrows pointing to some spots where they're looking to put in some sort of a rain garden to kind of capture that storm water before it reaches the beach. Okay, so this next project is Latham Park. So similar to Barrington Beach, they had erosion along the shoreline there. They had stormwater coming in from the streets as well, and they have a little bit of a seawall there that was not doing a great job. Their natural area was not doing as well, and they had pooling in the grass area from all the stormwater. So what they did was they took out some of the parking lot, just like at Barrington Beach. They put in a natural area, did some plantings. They kind of bolstered that seawall, those large boulders there. They added a stone dust walkway and added some benches. And they also added an infiltration area in the middle of the parking lot so that stormwater would, move into that area and infiltrate into the ground instead of pooling in the parking lot. So lessons learned from this project, they have a lot of sand that's building up around the lip of the infiltration area in the parking lot. And their stone dust path and their benches need to be moved back farther. They're getting beat up by the wave action there. And they're thinking of installing rain gardens near Shore Drive, which you can see in that aerial, photo, and they're because they're looking to put in some more parking there. But overall, Phil said that it's much better than it previously was. All right, next is Allins Cove. So this is a pretty interesting story. Back in the early 90s, the Army Corps of Engineers dumped a bunch of silt into the cove, and that was from a dredging project. And a resident who lived on Byway Road, you can see in the aerial photo, she noticed that the banks of the road were eroding away, and there's a lot of infrastructure under that road, and it was it's basically threatening the road. So she brought this concern up to the town, and they looked back and were like, well, the Army Corps of Engineers, they're responsible for projects that they were in fault, basically. So they were brought in, they provided a lot of the funding for this, and it was talking with Wenley Ferguson, it's basically a salt marsh restoration project, in which they added these coconut core envelopes to the edge of the road to bolster the, basically help the road stay put and protect it and the infrastructure underneath. So you can see in the photos on the right, you have the coconut core being laid out, and you see the sand that they're gonna fill it with, and then they basically sew it together with coconut core like rope. So there's no plastic or anything else. It's all supposed to naturally decompose over time. So this is kind of what it looked like before. You can see the really steep embankment there where the road is kind of falling in. And then this picture like blew my mind, how well it grew in. So they put in some sand, they carved some sand, and then they planted dune grass on top of it. You can see now how kind of lush and green it is. It's really holding those the bank in place. So lessons learned with this project. Wenley Ferguson said that one of the coconut core envelopes needs some sort of maintenance. She didn't get back to me on exactly what she meant by that, but she said overall they're mostly holding up well. They planted beach grass to hold the sand in place and to help prevent the further erosion, and also because you want to cover up the coconut core because UV exposure breaks it down over time. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Okay, so this is my favorite suite of pictures. These Janet Friedman from CRMC provided me with these photos, so unfortunately don't have a before picture for King Park in Newport, but this is a great showing of what the process for putting in these coconut core envelopes looks like. So first, so the issue with this beach was there was a lot of erosion after Sandy. The sand was being consistently eroded away. So they decided to put in these envelopes. So they basically dug a trench right at the grass line. You lay down the coconut core fabric, and then I didn't realize, but you line it with another, with like burlap fabric, which is also another like natural fabric. And then you fill it in with sand, close it up, and then you sew it. And then that's kind of, and then you cover it up. So they did not put any dune grass over over these ones at this site. And I asked Wenley Ferguson why that was. She said it was a highly popular area. She didn't think that putting grass there it would stay because there's a lot of public walking around, and so it wouldn't be really well protected. And I'm sure a lot of us know those trails on Napatry, if you're walking through the grass, it gets trampled, and there's no real path, then the dune grass doesn't do so well. So that was in 2014 was construction. So this is what it looked like in 2017. So that was 3 years later. It looks pretty good still. You can see the beach is fairly flat and even. And then this is in 2018, so you can see some of the coconut core fabric that's been, exposed. It looks like it's been ripped open. It's kind of hard to see the picture all the way on the right. It's still intact, but that one's definitely been exposed. So what went wrong here? Well, talking with Janet, she didn't have an exact answer, but she brought up these interesting points that I want to outline for you. Sediment grain size. So when you see that picture of the sediment there that they dug up and then they filled in the envelopes with, is actually a lot of clay. It's not sand. So she was wondering maybe something to do with the sediment grain size, if that would have an effect. Also, like I said, they didn't plant any beach grass to kind of hold the sediment in place there. And then what she said was these envelopes are meant to be a temporary fix. I think their lifetime is supposed to be about 15 years, but even after 4 years, the ones here were starting to fail. And so she told me that probably the main reason for that, because you can see how this beach is in a protective cove, basically. It's there was a couple nor'easters in 2018, one of them that came in directly north, and she thinks that's when they had a lot of erosion on that beach. So you can plan for day-to-day erosion, but when you have a big nor'easter come in, these things might not hold up as well. Okay, so the Newport tide gate. So if directing your attention to the schematic in the upper left, this is the Point neighborhood in Newport. It's a historic neighborhood. And basically it's in a little bit of a depression, and the issue they're having there is water pooling in from the storm water, and then the tide also coming in, nuisance high tides, and both of those are infiltrating their stormwater system, and the water is coming up through the storm drains, which I'm sure some of us have seen in the parking lot right next to the yacht club. So in 2015, that first picture of the house, they had 1.25 inches of rainfall within an hour at the same time as a high tide, and you can see the water is pooling there in the streets. And then the picture on the bottom right, that's the intersection of 3rd and Marsh Street during Superstorm Sandy, where Teresa Crean I spoke with, she told me that basically those storm drains are like geysers coming up in the street because there was so much water coming in and had nowhere to go. So this schematic kind of outlines really well what the tide gate does. It's basically a one-way valve, so it allows water to go through one way but not in the other. So this is Bridge Street, and so that middle picture, you can see that's what was happening, the existing conditions. You have storm water coming down from other areas, and then the tide water coming in from the harbor, and the water just flowing up through the stormwater system into the streets. So putting a tide gate there, that prevents the tide water from coming in and just allowing the storm water to kind of sit there until the tide goes out, basically. So having a nuisance high tide at the same time as having a large precipitation event is kind of how they want to solve the problem with the tide gate. So that they put that in 2019. Yeah, they put that in 2019. I spoke with Julia Ford, the director of the Department of Utilities, and I asked her, well, is this working or not? And she said they haven't had the right conditions to really see an effect, or that she knows of yet, to see whether or not it's working. And they have plans to put in 2 more tide gates on Wellington Street, I believe, in the future. So hopefully that'll help out with some of their flooding in the Point neighborhood. Okay, so next, so keeping history above water is a national conversation, basically spearheaded by the Newport Restoration Foundation. In April 2016, or in 2016, they met to kind of figure out what to do to kind of preserve this historic neighborhood in Newport. And they had basically had this case study called Keeping 74th Bridge Street Above Water. That first picture on the top, that was taken around 1920. And then it's the same building, present day. So they spent 2 days in a design charrette. And basically they had the Newport Restoration Foundation, they had people from the municipality, they had engineering, they all sat together these 2 days to try to come up with problems some ideas to fix these flooding problems they're having in this neighborhood. And that tide gate that I just mentioned is actually one of the things they came up with. So just as a case study for this specific house, what they did was they elevated the boiler, they took it out of kind of the danger zone in the basement where they had a lot of flooding, and they brought it up to the first floor level. They also installed 2 sub pumps, and if those pumps are turned off, they get 9 to 10 inches of standing water in their basement. So they're pretty screwed if they turn off.
Is that a technical term?
Yeah. Yeah, so, and they also talked a lot about green infrastructure in this document that they came up with. Green infrastructure is basically using vegetated areas, or basically trying to keep the stormwater out of the stormwater system and instead allowing it to infiltrate into the ground instead. So something that you can do at your home is install rain barrels. My dad has one of these. It's pretty cool. So you attach them to the downspout, and all the water coming from your gutters goes straight in there, and you can use it to water your garden. And so the city of Newport is actually encouraging its residents to implement these types of green infrastructure at their individual homes. Next is the rain garden or bioswale. So a rain garden is usually used it's like a smaller version of a bioswale. Bioswales are usually used along roadsides. So basically it's a depression where water can accumulate. You have plants there that like a lot of water. And so you can see in that middle picture, this person teamed up with their neighbor. They put a splash guard under their downspout and kind of directed their water from their gutters into this rain garden. And you can see the water kind of pooling in there, and instead of going off and causing a flooding in the street. And you got a really nice garden out of it, which is a plus. And then something else is permeable pavement. So the option on the left, permeable pavers, you have basically these blocks that are kind of interlocking together. They allow water to run through the cracks. Permeable concrete is basically concrete that has is more porous, so allows the water to infiltrate through. And the same with the permeable asphalt. So some of the issues with permeable pavement is that sand can get stuck in it, so you don't want to be using sand in the winter on these types of surfaces. And also, usually you need some sort of special salt to use as a de-icer instead of regular salt that you would use in the winter. And so they utilize green infrastructure at the Newport Gateway Center. Superstorm Sandy created some problems. They destroyed the iconic sails of the Gateway Center. And so when they were rebuilding, they decided to make it so that it could survive a Category 4 hurricane. And then also they implemented a green infrastructure. So they have rain gardens, they have about 5. And then also permeable pavement, so that they actually got some money because they were using these types of green infrastructure. And then you can see the photos on the right. Those are just Google Street photos from Google Maps. You can see the rain gardens there. And I'm not entirely sure where they use the permeable pavement. I spoke with Greg Norden from RIPTA, Rhode Island Public Transport. And He didn't get back to me on that question, but I'm interested to see exactly where they have permeable pavement there, if it's just on the sidewalks or if it's actually in the parking area there where the buses are. So lessons learned here, permeable pavement requires a lot of maintenance. Like I said, you can't use sand on it, and you have to use a special salt as de-icer. So moving along, so South Kingston, I'm sure you've heard about the seawall there at the Ocean Mist house. So you have Matunuck Road there, and there's a lot of infrastructure underneath it. It's the only road that goes in and out to about 240 homes neighborhood there, and it's the only water that the water main there that brings water to those homes. So it's the threatening the town decided that it would be too costly to build a new road for the marsh. It was going to be just too much money, and so they decided to put in a seawall there right next to the Ocean Mist. And you can see the construction, those steel plates on the right side. And this is kind of what it looks like now. So in that aerial, you can see the seawall extends about 200 feet from the Ocean Mist. And so that's phase one of the project. They're looking to extend it an extra 150 feet to the west to further protect that road there. What I've read about it is that the seawall is doing its job so far, but I'm sure a lot of you know that CRMC isn't really encouraging people to put in hardened seawalls. They're really encouraging people to use more dissipative structures like the coconut core sandbags. And so originally the owner, Kevin Finnegan, I believe his name is, of the Ocean Mist was against putting in the seawall there, but he came to an agreement with CRMC saying that if they allowed him to rebuild that other rocky wall that you can see in the lower right side picture, that's Mary Carpenter Beach there. If they allowed him to rebuild that to help protect his establishment, then he would be on board with them extending the seawall an extra 150 feet. And also Save the Bay has been against this project, and a lot of the townspeople have been as well. Ooh. And so lessons learned with this project, they had some issues with the construction when they were putting in the wall there. The water actually breached over the road during construction, which really left the houses there exposed. And they also had issues with vibrations in the Ocean Mist. So during construction, you're not allowed to exceed a certain amount of vibrations within that building. The building has its own building codes, and they came pretty close to exceeding those limits. So that was a concern that they had with that. Okay, so next up is Wickford. Wickford is a historic village, and they have a lot of trouble with flooding in their parking lot, Brown Street parking lot in particular. You can see the storm tools map on the right side. Yellow is 1 foot sea level rise, and then blue is 2 feet. And you can see, Pete, if you can point out the parking lot, it's the yeah, there. So that's the Brown Street parking lot. So after 2 feet of sea level rise, you have basically a bunch of pooling in that parking lot, which you can see from those pictures on the left from my Coast app website. Which if anyone hasn't been on that website, it's pretty cool. You should check it out. So basically what they did, what they've come up with is the GRIP project, which is Green and Resilient Infrastructure Planning. They picked Wickford as a site to work with the municipality to kind of come up with conceptual designs for what they can do to help this flooding problem that they have in the parking lot. So this is the design that they came up with, the municipality came up with. And a lot of it, I think they're trying to implement a lot of green infrastructure as well in this project. But they haven't implemented anything yet. They have the design phase down, but they're looking for, I believe they're looking for the funding to implement it. And also as a part of that, they teamed up with the URI landscape architecture class, and these students came up with their own conceptual designs, a lot of them using green infrastructure, I believe. So this person, Bryn Armstrong, she has a bioswale in there, and a green roof on the Rite Aid there. And so they presented these to the municipality, kind of like I believe the URI students are doing now for the Watch Hill parking lot, what they're working on. So you can find this document online. There's a bunch of these designs from the students. And so a lot of them using, like I said, green infrastructure. And so I just wanted to show you, I actually wanted to pull up a couple of websites.
Yep.
If we can do that, just to show, these are some really great resources that I found for sea level rise projects in Rhode Island. So the first one is the SAID project, Shoreline Adaptation Inventory and Design. So it's in the slide.
Oh.
Yeah, those are the links right there. I don't know if you can copy it. And then it's the, so this is their webpage, and then it's the Google Map Shoreline Adaptation Inventory. And a lot of the projects that I've outlined are actually in this, this map. So, and they have them sorted by project type. So you have pavement removal, stormwater, structural removal. So if you want to click on, so Barrington Beach is under pavement removal. If you just double click on it, it'll bring it up. And you can click on, yeah, so it tells you a little bit about the project, and some of them have pictures, which is where I got a lot of my pictures for this presentation. I'm sure you'll recognize that. But yeah, you can go through and look at all the different projects that are going on, pending project as well as completed projects. And Latham Park is in there as well. Almost there. Yeah, so if you zoom in. So if you click the brown, yeah. So the parking lot there, and so the seawall there, that's what they've listed as this. This is a pending project, I believe. Yep. This is a great resource. That's just regular Google Map stuff. But yeah, it's kind of integrated with the maps and. So the next one, the next resource is the GRIP interactive map, which highlights a bunch of, is also based a lot of green infrastructure projects in the state. This is another great resource. So just click on interactive map up here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so they also have them parceled out by project type. So yeah, there's a wealth of information. So there's, yeah, Latham Park, wealth of information on these websites. If anyone wants to, if you want to go in through in your own and look at what's been going on. These are the private property. Yeah, and this next one is just the PDF of the Barrington Municipal Resilience Workshop, community workshop, summary of findings. So that's what I was talking about in the beginning. I believe Westerly should probably have one of these as well.
Yeah. I don't know that it has it been produced yet.
No.
Not yet.
I think it's in the process of being created.
And yeah, so this last one is the mixed-use climate demonstration site report for Barrington and Warren. And this one is on our website too, right, Pete?
Yeah. Yep.
Great.
Okay, so back to full screen on this.
Yeah. Oops. So just some acknowledgements. I talked to a bunch of different people, but I just wanted to thank Phil Hervey from the Director of Planning, Building and Resiliency from Barrington, Kim Jacobs, who is the Resilience Coordinator from Barrington, Wendy Ferguson from Save the Bay, Janet Freeman from CRMC, Julia Forge, who is the Director of the Department of Utilities in Newport, Greg Norden from RIPTA, he's the Chief of Strategic Advancement, Teresa Crean, who provided me with the names of all these people to speak with, and then also the Watchell Conservancy for hosting. So with that, I can answer any questions.
Okay, so if you're following this on Zoom, please send a chat message that you would like some audio time, and we'll just work through you top to bottom on that chat list, and then we'll open it up for those of you who are only on the conference call line. So Janice, do you have any names yet? Okay.
I have some questions in the meantime.
Yeah, so let's do some internal questions first, and that'll give folks a chance to chime in.
First of all, thank you, Melissa. Really fascinating to see everything that everyone else is doing. I think putting a hat on about what might apply here, etc. The biggest questions that kept coming up with me at every single one of them was, how much does it cost and who paid?
Yeah.
And then understanding the decision maker maze that would happen there. So were there any that were clearly not successful? Any things that were, bang for the buck, they wouldn't do it again? I'm thinking about that, the one where the core had opened up and the sand was washing away.
Yeah, Newport.
Yeah, so I just wanted to point out, I have a lot of the information about the funding and the engineering companies on the outline that I provided. So those kind of nitty-gritty details you can find in there. Okay. And yeah, so just talking with Janet Freeman about that project, they're not sure what they're going to do going forward. They that was pretty recent. So 2018 was when those pictures were taken, and they haven't done anything since. I think they're still trying to figure out what their next step is.
Okay. Regarding those core envelopes, is there an understood maintenance that needs to happen with those, or does it depend on how they were installed, what sort of overtopping is on them and that kind of stuff?
I would speak with Wendy Ferguson from Save the Bay. She has worked on a lot of those types of projects and could probably answer that question a lot better than I could.
Thank you.
Randy has indicated he has a question. Randy, the microphone is yours.
Hi, good morning. That was absolutely fantastic. I really thank you for just for that clarity, for that thoroughness. It was really, really well done. Deborah, raised some of the questions I did, which is who pays and why, and from the fire district standpoint, you know, where does our fiduciary duty begin, where does it end?
Mhm.
But I want to go to a basic question that I suspect that somebody has answered before, but you say that, and I know going back 18, 15 years ago when I was working with CRMC on a project in Watch Hill, they are, I hate to use the word stuck, but I'm going to throw that out on the notion that anything that needs to be done has to be of a natural substance.
Right.
Has anybody actually looked at the, let's just say, the core versus concrete versus, I mean, concrete you could argue is natural too, but there are other elements, there are other things that one could do of a more permanent nature. And the question is, has anybody actually studied the cost of that versus the cost of these cores versus how long one particular type of defense would work versus another, so that their basic philosophy may be flawed? You follow what I'm saying there? Because you could have you could have other ways of handling this that is quote non-natural, but really might be far more effective in the long run.
Yeah. So my understanding is that with hardening your shoreline with a seawall or something, is it ends up harming other areas because of how reflective it is against wave action. It doesn't dissipate the wave action like the natural barriers would. And so a lot of what Save the Bay's argument is against the Matunuck seawall was that, well, this is going to end up harming the areas around it. It might protect the road there, but it might create more erosion in those other areas. Does that answer
But you can have a cementitious bag that would do the same thing and would last a lot longer. So I'm not sure what the argument is.
So Randy, Mr. Rabideau reported back to, hold on, let me douse my microphone here. Let's see. Sound.
It would involve a much lengthier application. We could still go through that process now, looking at when we actually might get this project started. So yeah, we've considered various options, and we will still consider various options, and then of course bring them to the fire district council.
I mean, it just seems that why agree to a planned obsolescence? It just, and I don't know that the alternative is better, but I think it really ought to be studied before we, when when I look at all the things that were done so far, which were great, but I mean, a lot of them just seem to have a useful life on it that might be a little bit shorter than alternatives.
I think, Randy, one of the considerations regarding that specific project, and I think we probably ought to move to explaining, fire district stuff, and then we can continue on with comments unless people have more questions for Melissa at this moment. One of the things regarding that life longevity of that particular project was that it seemed to dovetail nicely with where sea level rise seemed to be moving to at a projected point 15 years from now. So we were getting a 15-year useful life on the core envelope solution at Napatree as designed, and I think we could discuss the design details at some point further, but that there was more than 3 feet of water coming in 15 years from now. So it sort of dovetailed nicely in that we'll need a bigger, better other solution if we're still trying to fight this at that point anyway. So the thought was that perhaps pursue something that was a quicker permitting process with CRMC that was a natural erode, go back into the environment, and since sea level was still coming, we would have to come up with a bigger, stronger solution anyway. But that is absolutely up for cost benefit discussion with the fire district council, with others.
Deb, this is Dennis Algier. I have to get off the call. I have to go on the call with the Department of Health. I don't know if I'll be back on, but I'll leave with this. I do have a meeting scheduled that's been canceled, but a meeting scheduled with CRMC staff and the executive director in the upcoming weeks to discuss a number of issues along the coastline, as you know, which I represent. I'd be more than happy to share the outcome of the meeting with you when I come back there.
Totally appreciate that, Dennis, and thank you very much for
I have to go on a call. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Christian, you had a comment?
Yeah, Mel, I was just wondering if you would come across anything like a decision support tool that summarizes lessons learned like this project works well in these scenarios, this project works better in these scenarios, these techniques are needed to maintain this, this will allow the longest longevity.
Yeah, nothing really like that. Like I said, the monitoring aspect isn't really there. I think the state needs to come up with a systematic way to monitor these projects and figure out what is working, where is it working, why is it working here and not maybe somewhere else. So I was actually talking to Teresa Green about that, and she said, let me know if you find anything, and I didn't. So
yeah. You might look at other states. I know
yeah.
Washington State's Department of Ecology has a pretty good program on soft armoring of coasts. Might be something else to look into.
Yeah.
I've got a couple questions. Going back to the tide gauge in Newport.
Yep.
I'm really quite interested in that.
Yeah.
Because we have the exact same problem here in what I'll refer to as the North Boat parking lot. Because when the town of Westerly put in their storm.
Why are you looking at me?
Well, you're the storm water retention system, which is underneath that gravel out in that parking lot, it was undersized for the amount of water that was coming off the street. And then you add the insult of it not being able to flow out of that galley system because of the high tide. The town of Westerly has, when we were doing this project, had the contractor submitted a proposal for putting in a pump chamber, which would drain down that retention system. And so we're waiting for the town to come back and help us with that. I mean, really get it done, because it's on their, that's their dime, it's on their nickel.
Yeah.
We've had extensive conversations with now the new town engineer to deal with that. And again, you could see how the water is not just perking up, it's actually kind of being forced out of the clean out boards that are in that system right now. So there, but if there's somehow we could do something similar to that down on Fort Road, but that gets into complications because that water has not been treated.
Yeah.
Because what we can do is we pumped it out of the system, it's already gone through the system. So that's the good side of that.
I mean, when we use Peter's term, cost benefit, the envelope that they put in that lasted 2 years, 4 years.
Yep.
I mean, when we talk about cost benefit and the result, my God, I don't know how much that project
Yeah.
cost, but
That
obviously the best minds weren't in sync on that one, because
Yeah.
that had to have been a very expensive project for naught.
Yeah, so the issue there was, it was one big storm that came in and took it out, so.
So
yeah.
was Sandy, and I mean, when we start talking about permanence versus permeable, if you will,
Mhm.
I know that the Matunuck wall has been a source of contention for a long time.
Yeah.
And that the owner of the Ocean Mist has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Millions, I think.
Yeah.
Millions.
I was trying to be kind. Millions of dollars.
Yeah,
Then God bless him for staying with it,
Yeah.
and he's since purchased the building next door. But my point is that the permanence of that is when we start talking about cost benefit,
mhm,
we know that's going to be there, and obviously the protection of the road bed, the Matunuck road bed is so important.
right. So, I mean, that was one project where they had that issue, but the one in Allins Cove where they did plant a bunch of grass to kind of hold them in is doing pretty well, and that was put in 2005.
I guess my point is that CRMC may hold the ink, but they're not always right.
Right.
Dick, you had a question?
Yes, I do. Could we get a list of the funding sources for those successful projects that you displayed on the presentation this morning?
Yeah, so a lot of the funding is in the outline. That information there on that document.
Thank you.
This is Jocelyn. I can send that link to you.
That'd be perfect.
Any other questions from those who are in the office right now? Grant?
Hi, guys. Why don't we start off with I guess we're gonna go through the slides.
Yeah, so, but before we do, anybody in the Polycom, any final questions? Because Grant's gonna give us a briefing on some of the local projects now. Okay, hearing none. Grant, let me get your presentation up.
Before we get into this, I just wanted to loop back. You may recall at our last meeting, we were connected with Grant via a kooky telephone connection. And I think many of us were very intrigued by the concepts we were hearing from Grant, but couldn't quite put it all together. So what we wanted to do was to spend a few minutes today to have Grant be able to walk us through what he was talking about at our last gathering.
Grant, it's all yours.
Thank you. Sorry that I couldn't be at the last meeting to kind of put a damper on or answer some of the concerns that were coming up. I'm going to say going back to 2011, 2012, the Parks Commission has been concerned about this persistent nuisance high tide flooding that happens on Fort Road. And then because of the inability for people to access Navitry Point through Fort Road by the entrance to the Musqueamican Beach Club, we felt as though we should really start looking at how to deal with that erosion problem. And about 4 years ago, I went to, because Pete had mentioned that he had worked on a similar project on a river or an inland bay where there was boat traffic and the wake was disturbing the shoreline, and they had used some coconut core fabric logs to help absorb that wave energy. So I said, oh, that sounds really interesting. Maybe we can use that. So the original concept was not the burrito bag, sand ravioli, or envelope, but using these core logs. And I'm going to describe the core logs as being about the size of a telephone pole. They're about I'd say a foot, maybe 16 inches round. They're solid, and they're basically just a mat that's been rolled up and then somehow stitched together or what have you. And then I was just going to, and that was just going to mark the outer perimeter of this, and then I was just going to put sand behind it and then go ahead and plant that. We went to CRMC with that. They came back with an approval, but only going to maybe about not even 100 feet past the entrance of Napatry, going out towards the end of Napatry. And with the ever increasing erosion where we are currently today, and if you look at the slide where it says Napatry entrance, tide level 1.24 feet, that's kind of where we are, and we're getting to that more and more often now. Again, people have asked how many times does it happen in the course of a season? Well, it looks as though that we wouldn't be able to get emergency vehicles out there for 121 days out of the season. Then does this also cause a kind of a problem for the district? Because I really don't want to have a bunch of people going to town of Westerly and saying, we can't get out to Napatry because it's flooded. And also, if there is water, there are people migrating out through that entranceway. If they're walking through the water, their footing underneath, there's a whole bunch of different types of material. There's some blacktop, there's some concrete, there's some jagged rocks, there's also some old iron posts. All of those could just rip someone's foot apart, and the next thing you know, we have another issue. So I'm trying to keep the folks being able to have public access out to Napatry, and that was kind of the driver for this. I wasn't too worried about the emergency vehicles, but it was more or less, how do we get people out there so they don't come back and say, we can't get out to Napatry, and would make the fire district have to jump through bigger hoops. And also then there was that whole public view of this. Okay, so this one kind of gives you the history, where we started. Now the coconut fiber envelopes, which you can see right here. They do look like just exactly what they're described as big burlap bags. Again, I think it all depends on where they're placed and how they're stitched up and what material can you use to absorb the wave energy. The good news is that in that little kind of bend in the beach going out to Napatry at the entrance there, it's somewhat protected. And when I say somewhat, I mean it is very protected. And nor'easters don't really seem to affect it, and winds out of the west don't seem to affect it. But I think that the reason why we're in the condition right now is just the tidal action that's been slowly pulling sediment away from it. And there was a stone wall there once upon a time. And what we're going to do is harvest those stones and pull them back up and place them against the base side of the envelope. And I think that Scott has also come back saying is that they want to do a combination of burrito bags, envelopes, and also the core logs. Okay, where we are right now today. There is a new application which is being submitted by Scott Rabbit. That is going to be reviewed by another coastal engineer to see if he feels as though that what we're submitting to CRMC will A, give us the lifespan that we're hoping for, and that but CRMC, for all intents and purposes, likes what we're going to submit. Scott Rabideau has already had a meeting with the powers that be up there, And so he's gotten a green light to proceed with this. And we're going to go ahead, get the plans done. Then we will put it out to bid and to see exactly what those costs are. And then bring it back to the Watch Hill Fire District and say, okay, here's the plan, here are the bids, what do you guys want to do? And then we can entertain the lifespan of it, whether or not the value is there. But I think that we have to do something sooner than later because the public is going to come knocking on our door and saying, you've got to do something. So the next question we have, the next problem we have is the general flooding on Fork Road whenever we have high tides. And it appears that whenever we have tides that are high enough of greater than 0.8 feet above high water, it will flood through the entrance of the yacht club. And if you go to the yacht club today, you can see the amount of seagrass debris that has kind of wrapped itself around the stainless steel wires that make up the entrance to the club there. So that, go back to one. So we do have a problem of where this occurs, 74 times in 2019. And that we should address it. I mean, we have to address it. And because once we get that taken care of, then we can go back and take a look at all of the scuppers that we have in the existing seawall that allows stormwater to run out. And the proposal is that we raise the roadbed in that area by the existing sheet piling bulkhead from the entrance to the club going back out to the Napatry. We raised that by 6 inches, feathering back from the seawall back into the parking lot. We're also looking at exactly the efficiency of that. Will it actually seal the roadbed well enough so that water is not perking up through it? There are also the discussion about various, some type of geofabric. Maybe it's some type of mesh material that actually lies underneath or lies on top of the existing roadbed, and then we top fill that or top dress it with 6 inches of new asphalt. Those questions are being asked now, and we're looking into exactly how efficient that might be, because the problem that we have is that we can seal the wall off, but water is in high tides is actually perking up through the roadbed itself and flooding the road. So we've done various things to try to kind of seal that road off. We've used hydraulic cement. We've done a rain dance. We've done everything we possibly can to no avail. Yes, we changed up the various backflow preventers. We had that. The ones we have in there, the duck bills are the most effective. They're commercial grade. They cost lots of money, but they're installed and they are working. There's, of course, maintenance with everything. Little bits of seagrass get stuck in them, which causes them to not close completely. So there are issues, but these are seasonal things that can be addressed seasonally.
Isn't the main introduction of water, though, the hole in the seawall to allow for the ramp to get to the yacht club?
Yes, as soon as it gets to that level, water will work its way. Okay, see where the fire hydrant is? Going back to where the sheet piling wall ends, water will pool there because it's actually coming up through the roadbed if it gets to a certain level, and that level might not be right at the entrance. You hadn't gotten to the entrance yet, but it still causes problems. And that puddle will circulate out where that white line is. That kind of makes the pathway. So we're trying to stop that, and we're trying to do the hydraulic cement, seal up all those little cracks. But when it's actually perking up through the roadbed itself, it's like you step on one and it comes up here. So it's difficult. And people have suggested, the engineers have suggested, is that if you put down blacktop, it actually kind of seals it. Now, it might not seal it as well as we would like to, where it hits the concrete of the bulkhead, but there's a way of being able to spray that with tar as we are through the process to give it a better bond.
When you look at that amount of water there, would you say 80% comes just because the seawall's open there? Would you say?
I'm gonna say almost, I'd say that's, yeah, it's gonna say 90%.
Okay, so I would say a priority then would be damming that opening in some way.
Yes.
And then dealing with the other issues of
That's
permeability.
correct. Now, we currently have, we have Daco Engineering Company out of Mystic, who did the original wall for us, and the original bulkhead, and the one that you're looking at there. And he is looking at, and had a good long conversation with CRMC. They were saying is that because of the type of water and the magnitude of the work that we're going to do there, even though it's not particularly large or big or expensive, it still is something that's permanent. And so as a consequence, we have to go for a Class B, not a maintenance ascent, but a straight full ascent, which is going to take time. But they had the utmost confidence that if we do it correctly, which we are, because we've been given the details on that, it will be given to us. But it's not a maintenance ascent that we would get tomorrow. It's a 6 month. And we have all the elevation shots on that. Terencia has been working with Daco. I'm meeting with them on Wednesday to go over exactly what that looks like. And again, there was a conversation a while back about, all right, what is the height of, quote, the dam by the entrance there? Because we have to be sensitive, because right underneath that walkway, or right in that entrance, is all of the umbilicals that go to the yacht club, which is power, water, septic, and sprinkler systems. So we can't dig down underneath that. We can just lay it on top of that existing walkway. So I think that the conversation is, do we raise it 8 inches? Do we raise it a foot? And I think more is better, but then again, the consequences is on the land side of that, because where that kind of walkway, the crosswalk is, we're gonna have to elevate that, because all of that has to be ADA compliant. So the elevation from the entrance to the yacht club is then gonna have to be feathered back into that whole parking lot. So where that crosswalk is gonna be a crosswalk, but also a big speed bump, because it's gonna have to feather back on both sides of that. Plus the fact the sidewalk on the right side of the entrance there is also gonna have to be feathered up. And then right where the fire hydrant is, where that exposure of that's gonna be almost filled right up to with concrete to get that to pick up that elevation change. And then everything going back out there is going to be a nice fresh coat of asphalt.
For those who are present in the room, questions or comments for Grant?
I just have a quick comment for the group, which is that I just wanted to clarify that, again, this is a presentation from Grant on behalf of the Parks Commission about the work that they've been doing on these Fort Road issues. I want everybody to be very aware that this is Parks Commission work that still needs to be discussed with the Fire District Council.
Yeah.
Fire District Council, together with the Parks Commission, will come up with what they think is an appropriate solution that they would like to pursue based on all the things that they have to consider when considering these kinds of changes or improvements. So I just wanted to offer that caveat before we get into questions.
Yeah, and as far as, again, this is we have been the Parks Commission has been budgeted to get this information, to hire engineers to come and look at this, at the various options, to lay it out there, get numbers and put it behind what the costs are gonna be. Then we take that and we put it together for next year's budget, which starts in, our budgetary process starts now. So that's what we're doing. And then we take it to the finance committee, then we take it to the council as a whole and see, we're throwing it up in the air and see who wants to salute or not. That's their choice.
Christian, you had a question?
Just had a thought. Again, I'm certainly not an engineer in these matters, so entirely uninformed input here. But it seems like you're putting a lot of effort into sealing this and trying to fight Mother Nature, which is often a really difficult thing to do. Have you thought about going the other way and using permeable pavement and just elevating above the expected high tide and letting it drain and not trying to seal it?
Yeah, we actually had that conversation about putting in, pavers and basically get it high enough so that but we'd have to get it, then make it a foot higher, which would then work. I mean, that would be fun. But I think that what we're trying to do is that not increase the elevation of the parking lot more than 6 inches. And we would hopefully, by putting that break in there, putting quote the dam in there, we would not have that cooling or what have you, and we'd still be able to not have an issue. Again,
As a non-informed person, having listened to those discussions, I would add to that it's a balance between the water table pressing up from underneath. So permeable is a challenge because it also allows it to come up, not just go down. And they're meeting built grade at the buildings that are adjacent there and up at the street. So there's all those forces that are being recognized in terms of how much grade change can you handle, and then you still get the result that you need because of the water table underneath. So
because if you have the road bed here, if the duct bills are working well and not allowing water to come up through the scuppers, you have the road bed here and water level is here, the ocean is here, once you get in and get underneath. So by sealing off the road bed, we're trying to prevent that from happening. And if we can close that off, the entrance to the yacht club, I think we're there.
But they're good questions that all need to be considered.
Now, in the fullness of time, that steel bulkhead that you see there has a lifespan, and that lifespan is coming to the end. We've had it essayed a while back. They said that at that time that we had 10 to 12 years. I'm saying we probably have 10 to 12 years now. So I'm not that, I don't know. Looking at sheet piling looks kind of rusty, but it's still holding up just fine. But it does give us basically 10 years of time before we then have to look at a much bigger fix. Now, that to kind of wrap up my side of things, the next major kind of move on Fort Road would be the continuation, not to get CRMC people do not like sheet piling, do not like concrete and of course capped sheet piling, but we don't really have the land to use to be able to put in some type of buffer system. That road is right up against that very unstable small wall that's currently out there. So we're going to have to drive sheet pilings. I think we're only allowed to go out a foot off of that existing by CRMC. We can't go into the water very far at all. So our sheet piling is going to have to go right down along that kind of rubble wall that's there right now, and then cap that. And so the top of that new seawall would be approximately 3, maybe 4 feet off of the current roadbed, and in the fullness of time would go past the entrance to Napatry, go out and then return into that big dune system, so water would not come down around the back of that. But again, the reason why we want to put in the sand envelopes now, because we can't afford to go very far at all with the new seawall, but at least we can get it to the entrance. And if we use the sand envelopes, we get 15 years out of there, 10 years out of that, whatever it is. And then we can continue the sheet piling wall and return it into the payment system.
Any further questions by the folks present? People on the Polycom, any questions from you for Grant? Okay, hearing none. A couple of items that we might want to talk about. As Janice was explaining the student projects from both Eastern Connecticut and URI, we're about a month and a half out from getting a ton of really interesting ideas on how to deal with all this. And throughout various parts of Watch Hill, some of the students are working in some of the residential neighborhoods. The plan was, and Janice, do you remember the date, April 28th or 29th? The plan was on April 29th, the URI students were going to have a big report out, and all of us in the Watch Hill community, they call us the stakeholders. The stakeholders are highly encouraged to come. However, I'm fearful that that big meeting will happen. With the students alone, there's 60 people there, and with all the faculty, and then us, it would be a pretty big crowd. So that might have to, I don't know how that's gonna work. So stay tuned on that, but we'll be getting some good information from them. Ditto from the Eastern Connecticut students. It's really an interesting group from every conceivable academic background you can imagine. And so we're gonna get some good input from them. All of that is due in at the end of April, early May. So that's one thing. It might be worth our time to convene a May meeting to digest and discuss everything that we heard from the students. And we might want to give some thought in a May meeting to, you know, much of our conversation this winter and spring has been around the 10 to 15 year fix for Fort Road, Napatri, the yacht club. We haven't really talked about the 3-foot sea level rise fix, you know, the big issue out there. So we might want to kind of bring that up after we've seen what the students are planning, because they're focusing on 3 foot of sea level rise too. And one idea might be to create a subcommittee of our group to start making some headway on looking at our various solutions. And when we start meeting again, say November, December, we'll have some traction on the big question. From the Park Commission, there are a lot of moving pieces right now on the Fort Road Yacht Club flooding. So I think we have some momentum and traction there, but the big 3-foot fix we haven't really addressed. So does that sound like a reasonable plan for everybody? Maybe one more May meeting before the chaos of summer erupts?
Sounds good.
Okay, yeah.
Sure.
And so we can do that. We can schedule that electronically. Any other kind of new business while we have everybody together? Not yet, but we certainly can. Okay, so as we brought this up last time, it's on the website. The Rhode Island DEM has an RFP out. Proposals are due April 6th. $3 million to spend on shovel-ready coastal mitigation projects to create solutions to sea level rise problems. Deborah and I went to the Q&A session at DEM a couple of weeks ago. It was really a very informative couple of hours spent. They are intent in spending their money. They are really focused on green solutions. They don't want gray, hardened shoreline solutions. They'd like to get as much done on these green solutions as possible. From everything that we heard, the core bag sand solution for the Napatri entrance is a very green solution to that problem. And so we could be extremely competitive, we feel, in putting in a proposal. The numbers that have been floated around for that project are $140,000 plus or minus. That is totally in the sweet spot of the DEM funding. So that would actually, you know, probably be one of the more modest grants. So I think that we could be really, really competitive. The, as we discussed last time, the grant opportunity requires a 25% match by the applicant. Should we pull the trigger and go forward, it would be a joint Park Commission, Fire District, Watch Hill Conservancy application. In a perfect world, the Fire District would be the banker on this, so the money would come to them. And if we couch the project as two elements, say the road, fixing the water coming up through the road, and Napatri, if the fire district could cover the cost of the road work, which we're guessing would be about 50
100, I'd say about 110.
for the road.
Yeah, and just kind of give us round numbers.
Okay,
yes,
okay.
120, and it makes it works well for your math.
Yep, and so the proposal would be, we have a $240,000 project. We want DEM to pick up 120, 140, and we'll cover the remainder as our match. And so that would be the strategy. Deborah and I have totally gone through the RFP, reading it very closely, and I think we check all the criteria boxes. So that's something that's out there, and what we need is a commitment from our group to support this, because if we can say in the proposal that this project is endorsed by the Watch Hill Sea Level Rise Resilience Consortium, who wrote this nice resolution last year, that it's a community founded thing, I think that would be really powerful. And so the idea would be that I would make a first pass at a first draft of the proposal, and we'd send it out to the Park Commission and others who felt that they would want to have some editorial input, and we'll give it the best shot that we have.
What do you need from the park side of things as far as putting together the information that you're going to present? In other words, like you using the sand envelopes, not the geotech fabric, but the cocoa fabric. All of that has to be put into some kind of plan.
Absolutely.
So you need that from Scott ASAP.
What we could use from Scott or Chirenzia ASAP is something that looks like an engineering blueprint for the project.
Okay, talk to Chirenzia again about the entrance to Napatri. They're scheduled to go out this coming week, maybe Wednesday or Thursday, to take care of everything that Scott needed, his wish list. And then, so we should have something, hopefully all put together. We have to talk to Scott and make sure that he knows that we have April 1st.
Yeah.
It's a deadline for that. And I'll also talk to DACA because we need to have everything on the other side of the equation ready to go too. Maybe not submitted to CRMC yet, but close to it.
The some background information, the timetable is we would be given an award notice in May. Wasn't it in May, Deborah, that their target was? And this would give us this summer to prepare a request for proposals. Using the state money, we are obliged to follow state purchasing guidelines. And so we need to compete this out. But you know what? We would want to anyway, I think. And then I think the idea would be to, rather than disrupt all the summer traffic out there, this would be a fall project. And you know what? That's a sane timetable. To get anything done between now and the beginning of the season would be, that would be pretty crazy.
So I would also just like to offer that this application could also be structured such that just the Napa Tree project was being submitted. If for some reason the information was not together on the damming, paving, whatever portion of that in enough detail to submit to Rhode Island DEM at this moment, we could work with the 25% match within the standalone Napa Tree project. We're allowed to use volunteer time and assign values to that. We're allowed to, use your Chirenzia expenses or the other preparation expenses that were put together. So I think it could also work as a standalone if for some reason we couldn't get the other information together or there wasn't consensus within the fire district to pursue all of that. That said, we are chasing an April 6th deadline. We need these facts and agreement to move forward in a particular way in very short order. We've got to draft this stuff up and get it out to the parties that need to approve it and sign it, etc. It is absolutely imperative that the fire district agree to go along with this. This is not something that the Conservancy could put in on our own. The landowner of the property has to sign the application and say that they're going forward and they agree to do this. So we need to pull these things together.
Does the fire district have time between now and during the budget cycle and whatnot to participate fully? I mean, Randy would know better, of course, but because it's such a short window, because the commitment needed from the fire district is so significant. I mean, we're talking about a tax increase here and potentially for our part of it, for the Watchung Fire District part.
I think if you were to include this yacht club entrance portion of a Fort Road response, that absolutely would. There is, if you look at just the Napa Tree response, I think given the monies that will have been spent for Chirenzia, the monies that have been spent for Scott Rabideau, the volunteer time that's been put in that we can assign value to for collecting the data on the flooding, the elevations, the research into the proper solution there. I think we could turn that in as a standalone and that it wouldn't require additional cash monies other than to pay for the things they've done. I mean, I could be wrong with that. We need to do those things on back of an envelope quickly. But I think we could make that a standalone.
Is Joan back on the call?
Yes.
Yes, I don't want to continue this discussion in public, quite frankly, because there's a lot of fiduciary issues here that I don't necessarily want to go through. I think you know my position on it. I made it pretty clear. So I think I would like to leave it at that.
Okay, sounds good. So I just wanted the rest of the group, because we've raised the Rhode Island DEM.
Having said that, I don't know if Joan Beth wants to chime in as well.
Joan Beth, are you interested in chiming in?
Sorry, I was having trouble getting the mute off. No, I think it's great if we have this conversation offline and then bring back to the group.
Very good.
Sounds good.
Randy made a request last week that he would like an engineer's perspective in all this. And so we did some homework and determined that one of the senior coastal engineers who's also licensed in every New England state, a company called Fairbanks Engineering, located in Rhode Island, is held in very high regard by CRMC. They think highly of his work, and he has a good track record of being compliant with CRMC needs. So we're going to schedule a meeting with Mr. Fairbanks next week. Yep, and bring him out and show him the sites, explain what our thinking is, and get sort of an independent peer review of how we're approaching this. If he has serious concerns, now is a good time to learn of them. And if he thinks that we're on a good path for a 10 to 15 year fix, not the 3-foot sea level rise 2050, but a 10 to 15-year fix, that'll be really helpful information. So that's a little bit of news that we wanted to share with the group too.
Well, I mean, just to be clear, I didn't say I wanted an engineer. I said specifically, I want a coastal engineer to look at the plans.
He's a coastal engineer. That's it.
I know, I get that.
Yeah.
I know, and I'm glad you responded that way. So let's just see. I really would like to see what they have to say first.
As a little sidebar, he's been doing all the work around the lighthouse to fortify that shoreline, and coastal engineering is his baby. So I think this is going to be a very interesting meeting. Any other comments, new business? For those of you in our virtual world, did this work with the Zoom and the Polycom?
Yes, that was terrific, Peter. Really great.
I fear that especially over the next few weeks, maybe few months, we're going to be doing more of this rather than less of this. And I'm delighted that this worked. I'm grateful to the Conservancy for picking up a $150 tab on the Zoom software to make this possible. None of us had any experience with Zoom until 2 days ago when the coronavirus stuff hit the fan. So I'm glad that this worked out, because there was too much great information today from Melissa to put off. And with Melissa in Maine, it was great having her down. And I want to extend my thanks to Melissa Cote. Can you believe the work that she did? Melissa, are we going to be getting a phone bill from your cell phone with all the call time that you made? That was absolutely phenomenal.
My lunch half hour.
Any closing comments, further comments?
Yes, also Jocelyn, thank you so much for all your organizational skills. Really, we couldn't do it without you, honestly. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry that there were so many emails going back and forth, but I just wanted to make sure everyone had the information, and things are changing so quickly that we have to kind of do this on the fly. So I appreciate all of your flexibility in still meeting with us this morning.
Absolutely. And we also want to just make sure that, that we understand there are other priorities that may be coming up. We understand as people pop in and out, and we send our very best wishes that everyone stays well and is in a way in place to help those they love and care about. So.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Is there a motion to adjourn? I hear a second. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.